All right, good morning and welcome to Max Minutes. We're glad to see you here. I think we're going to give it, I think Daniela and Darlene, maybe give it one more minute to get started. All right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Max Minutes for August 6th. Hopefully everybody has had a good week and you're ready to go into the weekend. But before we get to that, we have the next round of Max Minutes scheduled for you. We're very excited to be talking with Darlene Lynch and Daniela Perry today. As we all know, the economy is starting to open back up and businesses are trying to get back to normal, and schools are opening and recreational areas are opening up, and we're trying to get this jump started in Georgia. And one of the issues we're having is with finding enough workers to support all of our employers' needs. And today's discussion is going to be talking about this topic and about how immigration policies have affected the workforce in Georgia. And so we're very excited to have Darlene Lynch and Daniela Perry, who's going to be talking with us this morning. Before we get started, want to, of course, give a special thanks to all of our anchor investors whose financial contributions are making it possible to continue along with the services of Metro Atlanta Exchange for Workforce Solutions throughout Metro Atlanta and actually throughout the state of Georgia. Of course, this is goes along with our individual memberships that also financially support Max, and we're so happy to have all of y'all with us today. And again, special thanks to our anchor investors. And if anybody's interested in becoming an anchor investor, please feel free to reach out to me, Rob LeBeau, or Joy Wilkins with Max. So you can see our agenda for today. We're going to, of course, start with our introductions and then talking about maximizing Georgia's global talent with Darlene Lynch and Daniela Perry, and then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. So just a quick update and welcome from the local workforce boards. Again, my name is Rob LeBeau. I'm the director for WorkSource Atlanta Regional, one of 5 local workforce boards in Metro Atlanta. We are all very pleased to be an anchor investor supporting Max, and we appreciate all of you being involved as well. As part of the workforce boards, we are opening back up. There's, as I mentioned, 5 individual workforce boards. We are in a little bit state of flux on some of us. A couple of us are open for full services in person. With Atlanta Regional, we just opened up a couple of weeks ago for in-person services, but are doing it by appointment. But with all that said, we are all still open and providing services. Just some are virtual, some are by appointment, some are open to all walk-ins. I encourage you all to get engaged with the local workforce boards. All of our customers can start at our common landing page at atlworks.org. So I encourage you to, if you're not familiar with that page, please go check it out, atlworks.org, to get engaged with the workforce boards. And so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Daniela to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Daniela, you can put up your slides. Again, thank you, Daniela and Darlene, for being here. Look forward to this great discussion. And all the participants, we thank you for being here as well. Daniela.
Thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. We're excited. And I'm going to share my screen so y'all can see it. But we're really excited to be here. I wanted to introduce Darlene Lynch, who's been such a great partner with us. She's the chair for the big partnership, and I'll let her kind of share a little bit more about it. But really, we're excited to talk about the initiatives that we've had going on, as well as the upcoming Global Talent Initiative and the Maximizing Global Talent Study Committee that's starting in just a couple weeks. So excited to give you all the details, and please feel free to make sure to add any questions in the chat. We're happy to talk a lot, but we'd love to know kind of what you're most interested in too. So, here at the Georgia Chamber, obviously understanding what's going on in the economy is really important for us and important for our member companies. So kind of just starting off with an economic overview of what we've seen and what, kind of prompted us to think about starting this Global Talent Initiative from the business community's perspective. And back in 2020, so last year, there was a 40% increase in economic development projects, which is great news. We did better in 2020 than we have in a long time, which is fantastic. I think a lot of folks weren't certain kind of what that would look like with the pandemic, but we did great. And then this year, we're actually on track to have an even better year. The Georgia Department of Economic Development is obviously tracking all the numbers about new job announcements and investment in the state, but we're really doing great. People are excited about what Georgia brings to the table, our incredible workforce, and it's just a great place to do business, which is why we've maintained that rating for a number of years. But we pulled some numbers back in May because we were starting to see as many of our companies were opening back up and starting to ramp back up operations as people were trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. Consumer demand was increasing, and businesses were having challenges in terms of meeting their goals, needs, so that they could actually meet the demand of consumers. So over the last 90 days, these numbers again were pulled back in May. There were around 231,000 Georgians that were still on unemployment, but there were over 406,000 job openings. And we pulled that from our labor market data sources, but we know that a lot of, that this number is probably much higher, kind of based on what you end up seeing in terms of how people post jobs. So obviously you see there's a huge shortage. Getting folks off of the unemployment rolls and into jobs isn't the only thing that we need to do to actually meet our demand. And I did want to note with the 406,000 job openings, this is almost double what we would normally see in a normal year. So I think that, we have been looking at these trends for quite some time and have seen that there are lots of workforce shortages on the horizon. Georgia has benefited from a number of ways to grow, including migration to the state. And a lot of these have slowed, as well as our workforce participation rate has also slowed. So we knew we were going to need to think differently, but I think COVID was really the ultimate disruptor that prompted a lot of people to say, maybe I don't want to go back to my previous job. Maybe I want to go to a different industry. And I think it also prompted some folks to say, hey, I was looking at retiring. I'm going to go ahead and, make that move for my family. So we've got all of these dynamics. And at the same time, we've got this huge increase from consumers to meet demands. And so really what we've seen is there's a huge need to rethink what we've done before and rethink kind of the needs and opportunities and how we get to where we need to go in order to not only, sustain our current operations, but to grow to order, Georgia companies to hire more folks, drive more investment, and continue to make Georgia a great state for business. So we actually started our Global Talent Initiative back in 2019. We heard from a lot of our member companies that there were challenges with the current system of immigration, and it wasn't meeting their current needs. So again, we were really seeing that there was this war for talent kind of in every industry. And we really saw a need to think more strategically about how you upskill folks that are already here, and then also recruit folks to companies so that we can continue to drive investment, drive jobs, and create more opportunities for more people. I think a lot of folks think about it in a zero-sum situation, and we really see that if you're able to bring the best and brightest, you're able to grow in ways that you wouldn't be able to if you kind of just stick with your current options. So just some quick facts about the foreign-born population in the state of Georgia. Huge numbers of individuals that have immigrated to the state of Georgia. Many of them have created businesses. They're now employing more folks, and they pay a whole lot in taxes to our state, which is incredibly important to continue to fuel the services that citizens really need in terms of school, community health, all those things. Darlene, do you want to go to talk kind of a bit about BIG before we get into any of the policy recommendations or things that we've identified as kind of strategic things?
Sure.
I can go ahead. I can.
No, why don't you go ahead?
Okay,
Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So, okay. So we from our Global Talent Initiative, we worked with a number of partners, and we've identified a lot of reforms at the state and federal level. This is something that really requires an all hands on deck kind of situation. So H-1B visas are for specifically like technology and high tech jobs. Of course, we all know that Atlanta's got a huge number of startup companies. We're also seeing this growth throughout the state as many more companies start to upskill and start their operations in other parts of the state. But we really don't have enough option. We don't have enough workers in the state to continue to fuel our growth. I think you'll especially see this in terms of like software developers are always one of the top jobs that we're seeing having open positions in the state. Cybersecurity is one that we know is growing and it's just going to keep growing. So there's a lot of need for us to have that. And right now the current visa restrictions are limiting the growth of Georgia companies. Agriculture, of course, is the state's #1 industry. We're very proud of that. And there are a lot of challenges with the current H-2A program, which is related to general ag, and then H-2B related to forestry industry. So H-2A, there's challenges kind of with the current, seasonal workers that come here to, because every year they are experts in getting broccoli harvested. They know how to do it. They'll come to the US and they do it here in Georgia, and they'll kind of move throughout the country because they are skilled at, getting products out of the field really quickly so they can get into grocery stores and get into your family's table. We do have specific issues though with our actually dairy and poultry industry. They have to use the H-2A program, but their needs are year round. We all love our milk, we love chicken. We're obviously a huge producer of broilers in the state. And so we actually have needs to kind of create a different option for them so they can have the opportunity to support their long-term and year-round operations. And for H-2B visas, they actually, I think a lot of folks kind of don't think about, the forestry side of this, but there was last year, the administration actually made a change that limited H-2B visas into the country. And so as all of our forestry owners were trying to get trees in the ground, really to help us meet long-term sustainability goals, they had to completely stop their operations. Luckily, we're able to work with members of Congress to get that rolled back, but it certainly delayed a lot of planting of seedlings, which again is really important to our state's long-term sustainability. And I think we all love having great trees to give us a better quality of life. And I think too, from the state side, we really see opportunity to redesign workforce programs to remove barriers, to upskill folks and reskill. As we know, new technologies are coming online. We can't, kind of continue to operate with knowing the same level of expertise is going to be needed. Digital technologies is going to become, part of everyone's job. I think we've heard from some companies say that every company is going to be a technology company in one way or another. So I think we all need to start moving towards that mindset, understanding that we've got to think differently about how to upskill and reskill folks. Additionally, kind of on the state side, we see opportunities to really expand higher education access, whether it's for high school graduates that are DACA recipients, making sure they can get in-state tuition so that staying in-state is an affordable option. We also see opportunities to increase affordability for individuals who've immigrated to the state, want to get into a technical college program, but right now they have to wait a year before they're able to get that in-state tuition opportunity. So we know that our technical college system is top notch. We know our university system is world-class, and we just want to make sure that individuals are able to access it quickly so that they can continue to get employed and grow in their careers, and then invest back in the state of Georgia. We also see some opportunities for licensure reform, and I know Darlene will talk about this a little bit later with some examples they've specifically seen, but we want folks that are coming here that have skill sets to be able to find pathways to get back involved and to use their skill sets to actively contribute back to the state. So those are all kind of some opportunities that we see, and I think it promotes upward mobility for individuals that are here, but it also really is just going to fuel long-term economic growth for our state, and that's why we really think this is such an important topic. So Darlene, I will turn it over to you. And I think you might be muted, Darlene.
I'm going to share my screen because okay. All right. So thank you, Daniela. And I'm actually glad that you went forward on those policy objectives, because what's been interesting about this initiative is we were working toward the same ends without even realizing it. So around the same time that you all started the Global Talent Initiative, we started the Business and Immigration for Georgia Partnership, or BIG. And by we, I mean the Coalition of Refugee Service Agencies, which is a 20-member coalition of refugee and immigrant groups that advocate for refugees and immigrants in Georgia. And so the Coalition of Refugee Service Agencies, my organization, which is called the Center for Victims of Torture, and Amplio Recruiting, which is a for-profit company that works with the refugee workforce and connects them to Georgia jobs. So we all came together around the same time and noticed similar things, that there were workforce gaps at the same time as we had really talented folks in our communities who weren't able to enter the workforce and get those jobs. So the Big Partnership's goal is to create a statewide partnership of Georgia business and civic leaders committed to strengthening Georgia's economy by tapping the potential of the state's new Americans. And we have about 30 members now, and we continue to grow. So who are Georgia's global communities? A lot of people think that they're relatively small. And I've had many people tell me that, that the work I do is for a very niche group. That's not the case. 1 in 10 Georgians is foreign born. As Daniela showed, that's more than 1 million. And these folks are bringing skills and talents from just about every country in the world. Nearly half are naturalized U.S. citizens and voting in Georgia. 75% have at least a high school education, and 33% have a college or graduate degree. So, and our groups, a lot of us work particularly with refugees, and Georgia has been a top refugee resettlement state for 40 years or more. And these are folks that have been chosen by the United States to resettle here after having to flee their countries due to war or conflict. And these people had careers, had jobs in their countries, and were forced to flee. So we have doctors, teachers, architects, engineers who are all coming here to Georgia. And then also we work with DACA recipients, and we know that these are folks that have lived most of their lives in Georgia, been educated in Georgia, and have some barriers that they face as well in getting good, meaningful jobs and education. And Georgia's becoming increasingly global. The population change, if you look at the last, 19 years, foreign-born population has increased by 89%, and the U.S.-born population by 25%. So we're going to have a deeper and deeper pool of global talent, and it makes no sense to have barriers in their pathway to contributing to Georgia's economy. So these are the fast facts that I often use that show what Georgia's global communities are already doing for Georgia. And again, 1 in 10 Georgians is foreign born, but 1 in 7 workers is foreign born. Immigrant workers tend to be younger age, working age. So they are really core to Georgia's industries, forestry, as Daniela said, agriculture, but also a whole variety of industries that are important to Georgia. Top among those is healthcare. 1 in 5 doctors is foreign born, 1 in 5 home health aides, 1 in 10 nurses. And, that's an outsized influence when we have 1 in 10 Georgians being foreign born, but 1 in 5 doctors are. Similarly with STEM professionals, so software programmers and scientists and all folks in that area, 1 in 5 foreign born. 1 in 4 in agriculture, fishing, and forestry, 1 in 3 or even more in construction. And in the small business community, 1 in 3 entrepreneurs opening small businesses is foreign born. They are a real driver of small business growth in Georgia. And they employ hundreds of thousands of Georgians every year and produce 33 billion in sales. So, as Daniela mentioned, Georgia is very proud to be #1 state for doing business. And 1/3 of those small business owners are coming from other countries and have that entrepreneurial spirit. That's pretty much always been the case in America as a nation. But what we're seeing on our side, the folks who work with refugees and immigrants in Georgia, is what we call brain waste. We are seeing really talented people with lots of experience in their professions, either settling for lower paid, lower skilled jobs, or moving to other states that are more friendly to global talent. So this report was just released not too long ago. In fact, there should be a story in the New York Times soon featuring some folks from Georgia who are experiencing these barriers to fully utilizing their skills. So 18.9% of foreign born are unemployed or underemployed, as opposed to a smaller percentage of native born Georgians. These are some of the stories that we are seeing on our side. So just here in Georgia, we had a couple, both dentists from Iraq. Alabama has a recertification program that takes 2 years. And so dentists moved to Alabama. I was on a call yesterday where one service agency was telling the other, have your client move to Alabama. They can become a dentist much more quickly. We had an SIV holder. Those are folks who served with the US military in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he provided security in Afghanistan, but he couldn't be a police officer. So here in Georgia, you have to be a citizen, which can take many years, whereas in other states, you don't have to be a citizen. Utah just changed that. Tennessee is where we lost this individual because you can be a green card holder. And I know in Clarkston, for instance, where we're based, the most diverse square mile in America, the police force really wants people from the community to be on the police force. So this citizenship requirement in Georgia is a big barrier. We have a welder who's now, he was a welder for years in Syria. He's now working in a kitchen in Georgia, and physicians who have left Georgia for Florida, where the process is a lot more streamlined to become a doctor. So let's see. So the big policies objectives, and this I think is sort of fun, is to see how it overlaps with the chamber's objectives. We want to remove barriers to employment, including occupational licensing requirements like the few I just mentioned. We want to address education and vocational barriers, and that includes expanding in-state tuition benefits for DACA recipients, but also for refugees and SIV holders who have to wait, have to wait a year to get in-state tuition, even though they've never lived in any other state. Boosting the rural economy, and healthcare in particular is in real dire straits in the rural parts of Georgia and could really benefit from foreign-born experienced health professionals, helping those entrepreneurs to grow, and maintaining Georgia's tradition of welcoming new Americans. Like I said, Georgia has actually been a top state for welcoming refugees and others for many, many years. And our local communities have been a big, big part of it. I know too, because of this tradition of welcome, we have one of the most successful resettlement programs in the nation, and most refugees are self-sufficient within about 6 months. Even if they don't speak English, they are already employed and supporting their families within 6 months. So it's really quite phenomenal. we owe that a lot to our community support. So Daniela mentioned how we came together around some new legislation, and it was House Resolution 11. And what this says is exactly what the two of us have been talking about, that we have a deep pool of global talent that is just not being utilized at the same time as we're seeing growing workforce shortages in Georgia, in healthcare, in IT, all across the sectors. And so we said, let's create a study committee and really look at this mismatch. What are the barriers? Where are the gaps? And this resolution was bipartisan in nature and passed unanimously in this past session. So we were really pleased with the support. And not only was it supported by Republicans and Democrats, but also by folks from Metro, folks from outside of Metro, folks from the business community, folks from the refugee and immigrant community. And that's not always the case. So I feel like this is a pretty remarkable piece of legislation, even if it is just a study committee. So we are on a good path forward. And so this is the Global Talent Study Committee that resolution created. And we will be having meetings starting August 19th in Clarkston and going through the fall. We have 5 members of the House of Representatives, including the chairman of the Small Business Development Committee, plus members from the community. So from the refugee and immigrant community, we have the director of Refugee Women's Network. And from the business community, we have Renee Diaz, who's CEO of Diaz Foods. And this group of 7 will be listening to stakeholders inside Atlanta and outside Atlanta to try to come up with, solutions to some of these problems that we've been discussing here today. And we should have a report by the end of the year. So finally, I just want to say there are things you all can do. We welcome your help. We are excited about this new initiative and where it's going and opening up a whole new pathway to economic prosperity in Georgia. And, so for one, the big partnership is open. We welcome new members and members are as active or as they'd like to be. Some attend all our meetings, some just follow us online. Please do follow us, both the Georgia Chamber and the Big Partnership. The Big Partnership, in conjunction with the Coalition of Refugee Service Agencies, will be doing legislative updates and throughout the year. So when the session starts in January, and you can follow legislation with us. The Global Talent Study Committees are coming up and you can attend. If you have a story you'd like to share, please reach out to one of us and, let's talk about that, whether that's something the committee will want to hear. And then look for our report in November and see what we have in store for the future. So I think that is it, though I wanted to share my favorite photo of all time. This little guy from Clarkston, Georgia, and it actually says the talent has arrived on his shirt, so it doesn't get better than that. Oops. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Darlene and Daniela. And so I just want to remind all of our attendees that if you have questions at any point, please use the Q&A function. I know Darlene has a couple of questions, or Daniela has a couple of questions that we want to work through, but any attendees, please type in your questions under the Q&A function. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Darlene, I know we've talked about this a lot, but we've heard from a lot of our member companies that there's a huge need for additional workers and that the refugee population is so invaluable to continuing to fuel our state's growth. I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, the experience you've heard from so many companies, that work with like Amplia recruiting, of what their experience is with refugees in their workforce and in their, places of employment. But also, if you could kind of talk too about some of the barriers that I know were put in place by the administration last year, and maybe what you're hearing from some of your folks about how that may be evolving now with the change in administration.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. So as I said, Georgia's always welcomed many refugees from around the world. In the past administration, the refugee program was really, there's no other way to put it, it was just decimated. The average refugee admissions to the United States since the beginning of the program was 95,000, and the last cap on admissions was at 15,000 for the whole country. So whereas Georgia's communities were used to welcoming 2,500, 3,000 people a year, we welcomed 500 last year. And what we saw actually when we were doing advocacy, with federal legislators, is that the business community was in that office right before we got there doing the same thing, saying, listen, we need refugees. Don't, let's build up this program. We don't want to, minimize it. We want to expand it. So, we were on the same page with that. And what we were also seeing is we just could not meet the demand that from businesses in Georgia. They were calling, asking for refugee workers, and we just didn't have them. And, one of the reasons a lot of companies in Georgia like employing refugee workers and have been employing them for many years is these folks are super reliable, and they're bright, and they're dedicated, and they have a higher retention rate than even American-born folks. So even though there may be some language issues, those have not been a problem compared to the benefits that folks are getting from hiring from the refugee community. And like I said, that the refugees that we work with, they desire getting back into the workforce. I mean, wouldn't we all, right? I mean, that's their number one goal is, I want to support my family. I want to get back on my feet. And they really are an asset to Georgia and to our economy. So, the refugee program will be built back up under the current administration. The goal is 125,000 nationwide from a low of 15, as I said, but it'll be gradual. And we're getting ready to welcome, back normal numbers again to the state.
I think that's such an important point to make, Darlene, because I know it is something that our member companies, have been huge supporters of having, individuals that are refugees fleeing their home countries, and they just want to kind of get back to some kind of sense of normalcy and be productive. That's kind of, that they had lives in their home countries. They want to come here for a better quality of life. But I know that it's just something that we're really encouraging our member companies to start thinking differently about where to get workers, because they are having huge challenges with getting folks to stay, to come to work every day. I mean, we've had businesses like up in North Georgia that actually gave away a car to, like, they had a pool of folks that if you all came to work for 3 weeks at a time, and every day you were on time and you stayed, the whole time, you got entered to win like a new Mustang. So I think we're really encouraging folks to, again, think differently, really think about your goals and needs, because we know that, I think our current population just won't fuel the industry demand that we're seeing across the state, which is a good thing. But we want to make sure we're thinking differently so we can all meet those needs. And I think meet the needs of so many folks too that want a better quality of life. They want to be self-sufficient and, get their families established in the community and contribute like they always have. So.
Well, and, I appreciated an earlier Max presentation by folks from the Markle Foundation and Rework Alliance. And one of the things we're seeing is credentials, right? So employers are not used to seeing the kinds of credentials that our folks are bringing to the table, right? So I know you and I have talked about this, is that, if you're a refugee, you're not bringing your high school diploma with you when you're fleeing for your life, right? And yet you need to show your high school diploma to get into vocational school, or a sealed transcript, or some sort of paperwork that confirms you were a welder for 25 years. And so what the Rework Alliance, what I learned is they're looking more at alternatives to those pieces of paper. And, how can you look at the experience that these folks actually have and are bringing? And that's a really exciting area of opportunity for Georgia, is to start changing that mindset a little bit. And we're starting to see some of that in the technical schools, where they're not requiring that, sealed transcript. There are alternatives, and in hiring practices and in promotion practices, internships and apprenticeships, things like that, being just more creative, which, like you said, is what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and I'll note, I know Chris Chansey from Amply Recruiting talked about that he's had folks that have literally actually strapped their, transcript, duct taped it to their physical body, and they get to the US and say like, hey, here's my transcript, I'm ready to go to work. And they're like, well, it's not sealed and it doesn't work, which I think is just something that's, when we're all thinking about meeting workforce needs, that's a nonsensical barrier. And I think that it's just, but I know too, we've heard the same thing, especially from the construction industry. We've worked, with a lot of groups, and we just can't build buildings and homes fast enough. And we know a lot of folks really want to learn and have a lot of the technical skills, but I think to your point, Darlene, they don't necessarily have the formal credentials. And so how can we think differently about making sure we can rapidly upskill, get folks, those credentials based on their experience? It's just another opportunity that I think makes our state more competitive as we want to continue to grow and create more opportunities for our state.
Right. And, we have these great technical colleges, and there's one right in Clarkston, right, which is, there are 50 different countries represented in Clarkston and 60 different languages, right? And it's such a great place to have a tech school. And one of the things they're doing is, we teach ESL, right? So folks might have the skills as a welder, carpenter, HVAC, but they might not know how to say HVAC in English, right? So, but we make them go through sort of rudimentary English, that for all sorts of things they're learning, how to, I don't know, talk about things that are not necessary to being an HVAC technician. So Georgia Piedmont Technical College has developed a bridge program where they can learn specific English vocabulary for that vocation. And they're doing it in cybersecurity, in, in EMTs, things that are high demand. And, that's just sort of thinking outside the box. It's developing that curriculum, and it gets a talented professional into the workforce quicker. And so that's what we need. And what's great about this Global Talent Study Committee is it's bringing people together like you and I and other people who, have different ideas. And hopefully at the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of innovative proposals to move Georgia forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that to your point, what Georgia Piedmont Technical College has been able to do, they're so responsive and able to adjust and meet the needs of their community. But I think it's such an opportunity to show that bright spot to maybe other parts of the state that can kind of implement something similar. So I think the study committee really offers an opportunity to lift up those bright spots and, find opportunities to replicate and scale.
Yeah. And, one thing I wanted to share, if I could, is that, when we got started in this, we surveyed our community and tried to find out what are the number one barriers. We started out thinking occupational licensing was probably number one, and it definitely was up there. But you know what? It wasn't, the number one. A lot of it was access to education and to vocational school, and things like having that diploma, and but also, being able to afford, an education in Georgia. And what we found is refugees who are told they need to resettle in Georgia. They don't have a choice when they're told where to resettle. They have to wait a year to get in-state tuition. And in that year, life happens, so that became a major issue. And that's something that I hope we will, address going forward. And then the other one is access to language, and access to financing for small businesses were also very big issues.
Hey, Daniela, I wanted to, and Darlene, I want to ask you a quick question. So I think the study commission really is an exciting step, particularly in the political environment that we're in now. But what can we do at the local level to engage with this or support the work of the study committee?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Rob, and really appreciate you asking. I think, reaching out to members of the study committee and sharing, we can get that list out and saying, hey, appreciate you considering this issue. It's so important to our community. It's important to the state's growth. We're really grateful that y'all are taking the time to do this. And I think too, if you're interested in participating in one of the meetings, I know we are going to have a couple across the state. We're trying to make sure we get outside of Atlanta as well, and then state. Of course, I think both our first meeting and third are planning to be in the Atlanta area. So if you're interested in attending and kind of learning more, we'd love to. And so I think those are great opportunities, but Darlene, would love to get your thoughts too.
Yeah, we are, one of the things that we kind of bring to the table, I think, is the, individual stories are super compelling, and when you see that doctor face to face and he's working as a translator, you just say, this is nuts, right? So if folks know of people who have experienced this, we would love to connect with them. And also there's, there may be ways that we can support as well. So, we're always looking for people that have lived experience with these issues, and welcome them. And like I said, the big partnership, we have more credibility the bigger we are. So if people really are passionate about this intersection between business and the global community in Georgia, come join big, talk to me, and we'd be happy to have you in there and have your input and advice.
And I just want to say there are great examples that you all talked about. I think one of the services that I'm really intrigued about and think we need to expand is that the English language for technical subjects. Really, I think that's just a fascinating and critical component that we could expand to many different industries, many different languages. I think that's a fantastic step.
And I think we've got a comment too in the chat about how some food pantries actually ask for social security numbers to provide food assistance, which I think is, again, another barrier for folks that maybe, green card holders or something else, but they don't have a social security number. So appreciate you mentioning that too. I think that's so important. And so I think there's a lot of ways. And I think too, if you've got ideas for programs that you've seen that are innovative or cool related to, again, this intersection of business and global talent, we'd love to make sure we feature them in the study committee so that more people can get aware. I think the more we can share, the more I've seen, especially from our membership, it's just such a, I think, a light bulb going off. So I think it's really exciting to see, I think, the opportunities to make progress, especially in something that we don't always have agreement. I know we were really hoping just to really change the narrative around immigration reform. For us, it is a workforce issue, and want to make sure that other folks kind of understand that line of thinking and really why it's something that's so important for economic growth and, upward mobility for so many individuals.
Yeah. And I think Ada's comment, oh, sorry, Darlene. I think Ada's comment brings up a broader issue. It is when we start talking about immigration and working with refugees, I think there's confusion and there's concern about what is required, who you can serve, what services you can provide. We don't want to step on toes and go against state, federal policy. I think helping to explain, where those limitations are would be helpful. Because there are so many services out there that I think people could provide. They're just afraid to get into the mix of it and break laws or whatever that concern is.
I think that's a great point. And I think that's what we've really realized too, is that, we did a lot of polling to just state voters to kind of all voters in Georgia to kind of see where their leanings were on specific policy issues, areas. And across the board, we saw that, 85% of Georgians were really eager to have some kind of state solution. And two, we found that when we gave more specifics about individuals that have come here legally, they've lived here, they're involved in their community, it goes up. So I think that, to your point, there's a lot of, I think, misinformation, confusion. There's so many different state, federal rules. They all intersect differently. So the more clarity I think that we can provide, the better opportunities I think we have to serve individuals and to support the state as well.
Yeah, and I think that we see the exact same thing. It's sort of a shame, for folks on our side, if people hear immigration and then sometimes they think negative thoughts. And for someone who has come to this country and done everything by the book and is working really hard and trying to support their family, it's really disheartening, So I think coming to Clarkston is kind of eye-opening to a lot of people, and seeing that 90% are self-sufficient within 6 months. I don't even think my own grown son could do that in 6 months, and it's quite, the drive is quite impressive, and I think, they're just people like you and I, except some tragedy forced them to have to pick up and go and try to rebuild from scratch. And, I think they have a lot, our foreign-born communities have a lot to offer. And, other states have done things that have really sparked their economies. So it wouldn't be like this is a brand new thing. There are Republican states and Democratic states who have taken steps to integrate foreign-born communities into the workforce. So I was just on a national panel, actually, that was highlighting this Global Talent Study Committee as an innovative thing, especially because we're considered a red state in Georgia. And, there was a Republican state legislator from Utah that had gotten rid of the citizenship requirements for their police officers, which just didn't make sense. There's another legislation in Nevada that, said no occupational licensing should be based on citizenship status. Passed that legislation. Other states looking at workforce studies like ours or in-state tuition. And then a number of states, Republican and Democrat, who have created sort of a centralized public-private partnership to get foreign-born communities into the workforce and help them with their career pathways and everything on like a one-stop shop. And they've seen some real revitalization of kind of aging communities in their state because they're attracting immigrants to the state because of these measures. So there's a lot to learn from around the country, and I think we're heading in the right direction.
All right, so are there any other questions or comments from our attendees? We do need to start wrapping up here, but if there's any other questions or comments, we do have a moment. And I think, Daniela, did you get through the questions that
Yep.
that you wanted to? Okay.
Yep. I think, and just appreciate, everyone's time this morning. I think it's something that it's not an issue we talk about a lot, but I think it's an issue we should talk about a lot more. So just appreciate, Darlene, your partnership. It's been a lot of fun. And then just, again, the opportunity to kind of share more.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everybody as well. And, we are open to your suggestions. This is a new path that we're carving here. And so if you have ideas for people that we should connect with, throw them in the chat or email us. We are just building this as we go. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in today.
Yes, thank you, Darlene and Daniela. And just a reminder for everybody that this session is being recorded and it will be available afterwards. I know Joy will be sending out an email to everybody who had all the Max membership and everybody who had registered. So thank you again very much for participating. Great discussion. We will move on to wrapping up here. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see here. We'll just wrap up here, talking a little bit about Max and becoming a Max member. If you are not already a Max member, we encourage you to do so. I think most of the people, if not everybody who is actually on today, is a Max member. We certainly appreciate your participation. But Max provides just a fantastic resource to those of us in the workforce development profession and employers and all of our partners across the region. You can see this quote here from Jeannie Ross with City of Refuge and what it's meant to her. So if you are interested in learning more about Max and becoming a member, you can see the link there, metroatlanticexchange.org, join Max today. Upcoming, we will continue to be providing a series of virtual services. Our next Max Minutes is on Friday, August 20th. We have some great ideas coming up. We are finalizing those now. More information will be coming out about this very shortly. And then the next Max Academy, getting into a little more detail on the specific topic of youth apprenticeships, is going to be on August 25th, and that is in the afternoon. And again, these are recorded, but I think this is going to be another excellent session, which will be coming up here shortly. And we are talking about returning to in-person services at some point shortly. And of course, we're having to watch what's happening with COVID and follow CDC protocols. But that is also in the works, is talking about how do we come back and offer hybrid services, both virtual and in-person services and programs. We're looking forward to that. And finally, I want special thanks again to our Max anchor investors. These organizations really are critical in helping to keep Max up and running. And if you have any, so please use these services, thank them when you see them. And if you have an interest in becoming a Max anchor investor, please feel free to reach out to me or to Joy Wilkins with Max. And with that, I believe that is everything we have. Daniela, any last comments you'd like to make?
No, just thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Joy. Thanks, Darlene.